So let's do what works. Unfortunately, we do know how to do RTI. We've got it. We know how we need to do that, but getting people to go with us, getting people to do this work is another undertaking. In school psychology, Christine Sleeter wrote a paper in the 1980s called The Social Construction of LD, and we knew for many, many years that was a well-intended, advocacy-driven effort to help kids who were struggling. But we began to become aware of some diagnostic realities, like we can't really psychometrically distinguish low-achieving kids without LD and low-achieving kids who really, really have LD. We didn't really have a true positive definition for it. And yet, if somebody raised their hand, it was almost a sure thing. Saracen called it a search for pathology, that those kids were going to receive that diagnosis. And that maybe would have been fine if we could say that, in fact, this is a place we want to fight to get our own children into, to get these services, because they're going to grow so well when they get the right type of instruction. And it just didn't pan out. It just didn't pan out. And in some ways, school psychologists were the canaries in the coal mine. We became aware of this very early, and it may have even caused you to have a little bit of an existential crisis and feeling like a gatekeeper. But what happened is, post-2001, it all changed. And what I want you to know is, you really, really are making a difference. NAEP scores are going up. Diagnosis is creeping down. These are good things for kids. These are good things for kids that our field has participated in. And yet, this is the personal part. It's not enough to just know how to do it. And I have been a woman who has led with a data foot for years. I have been told I'm a little scary sometimes, and I can't imagine, because I really am only 4'11", and I mean well, and I know I'm very serious and passionate, probably like lots of you. However, knowing the answers and knowing how to do it, you can have all the answers and get nowhere if you can't get people to follow you. So I have a friend named David Cantra, and he says that he calls getting people to follow you, that piece is called artistic expression. And there's some really eye-opening data out there. The Freakonomics guys, does anybody follow the Freakonomics people, Levitt and I can't remember the other name? They looked at parenting and the things that determine parenting decisions that you could make that determine whether your kids end up being successful adults or not successful adults. And guess what? None of it matters. Like whether you pay for private school, whether you are paying for piano lessons, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Guess what? The only thing that popped, the only thing that mattered is whether or not kids felt like they had parents who were kind to them. Okay, so I heard that radio talk as I was pushing my child out of the car to go to piano, and he was crying. And I said, maybe I have underestimated caring and kindness. We're now seeing some of this come out. I'm very interested in decision-making models, and that's what I do my research in. And we're now seeing in medicine, Atul Gawande just wrote a great book called Being Mortal, and there are data coming out that talk about, which doctors get sued and which doctors don't get sued. And guess what? It's not the ones who have better technical mastery. They're all pretty good for the most part. Guess what accounts for who gets sued? It's the doctors that patients don't think listen to them. It's the doctors that patients don't feel like you really care about my problem. And so I'm here to tell you this very simple stuff of active listening and stuff we should know how to do. We're psychologists, right? If we can't do that work of asking folks what they want, understanding what their fears are when we ask them to do the work, then we miss the whole point. And this is a quote that I love from John Hosp, "Don't bring data to a faith fight." I wish I could go back and tell my younger self not to do that, because anytime I encountered resistance, I felt like, well, let me show you why you're wrong. Because I have the answers. We know how to do this. And I realize now that the places that I was very, very successful young in my career are places that simply gave me grace. They forgave me for being too prescriptive. too enthusiastic in some ways. And yes, we did have the right answers and we figured out the ones we didn't know, but I underestimated that what I was really asking these people to do was take a leap of faith. And you're doing that. And so if you're going to take a leap of faith with your people, you have to be worthy of that trust. You have to be explicit about the costs. And guess what? You got to be sure that you are helping people do the things that make a difference. Because people in schools are very busy doing all kinds of things that don't matter. They're doing all kinds of things that don't raise achievement. So you have to be very, very good about helping people. And by the way, that's technical mastery. But showing up, being worthy of that trust, following up, sharing the results every single week, being willing to show up when it didn't go well, which is hard to do, being willing to show up and say, let me show you how. Watch me do it. Let's tweak it. Maybe it won't work. Let's try it together and see what happens. That's the stuff that's very powerful, and it really requires that we've got to slow down. Okay, we got to tend to our slow adopters. This picture comes from an actual hike that I have done twice, and I have never made it to the summit. And what happens is you are on this hike. Anybody a hiker in the room? Maybe? You look, and you go, there is no way we're going up there. That can't be where we're going. And in fact, yes, you are trying. Not me, I never get there, but you're trying to get there. And for those people, what you have to do is know how to break down what you are asking them to do into the incremental steps that help them get there. Some people will run with you when you show them the picture of the peak. Those are the thoroughbreds. But I'm talking about the people who are more reticent. Maybe they've had more experience and they've been let down a few times in schools about some great new thing. So for those folks, what you want to do is just get them to agree to take the next step. That's it. And once they've done that and they feel that success, then you ask them to take the next step. Okay, so it's basically these steps. Select what works, use it well, evaluate it, and troubleshoot. Sounds like RTI, right? And we know how to do that. We know the steps. It requires leaders and school psychologists who know what the outcome is supposed to look like. They can map out the steps to get there, and they have this stick-with-itness to show up and troubleshoot and be worthy of that trust. You know, trust is not an epiphany, it's a process, right? When I decide to trust you, it's not an epiphany, it's not a one-time event, it's a process. And the way that is earned is by that consistent process of transparency, transparent decision-making. These are the steps. Okay, accountability typically flows like this in the business world. There's a guy named Aubrey Daniels, he's a behavior analyst, and he coined the term organizational behavior management. He is just a wonderful writer. He's got several great books, and I follow his stuff. He lives in Atlanta. And he says this is sort of the traditional model of the way things flow, and what he says we should be doing instead is reverse behavioral engineering. And what we do is we start with the end. We start with the front line. We start with the behaviors that we want there, and we work backwards to make sure that everything else is supporting that. Now, you know, if you start thinking about what this looks like in a school, what Aubrey would say, and he's actually written a chapter on schooling, he would say it all begins and ends with the teacher-student relationship and what is unfolding between the teacher and the student. And every single other layer in the school, from the front office staff to the copy assistants to the coach down the hall, everything in the school, as we work our way out, either supports the learning that is unfolding or doesn't. And we can define learning more broadly than just academic skills because, yes, these children are going to pick our nursing homes. I mean, they're going to hopefully solve Medicare and some of these other problems. So we also want them to be good citizens of the world. Well, guess what? Those are skills. We can teach that. And what happens is people in the business, in the field, understand that all learners are their responsibility. They only exist because they're there to support the learning. And that helps people accept division of resources for the greatest good. That helps people understand that if they are a sixth grade teacher, they should be paying attention to third grade instruction because they're going to get those children when they come to sixth grade. So we say principles first and structures second because oftentimes people start with structures. I watched one leader just crash and burn. And the first mistake he made is he came in and tried to change all the structures that didn't matter. And you got to start, I believe, with principles. And these are the principles that count. Most children in a class should attain benchmark levels of performance. Do you believe that? We all believe that. Intervention failure should be a rare event. Where it's not, it's really more of a signal that something's wrong with implementation or your intervention than it is probably a signal that the children just can't do it. It's not about that. It's especially if lots of kids are failing, right? That's an indictment of instruction, always. And it's just a problem to be fixed. With data, any solution just becomes a hypothesis to be tested and fixed. And we need to support intervention implementation as much as we support implementation, intervention selection. Okay, at some point you got to manage your message. And so that means the folks who are your resistors, maybe, you could call them slow adopters or you could call them resistors, you got to manage your message because part of the effort and the decision to trust and the decision to implement is that you have some expectations of those who are going to go on this journey with you. And one of those expectations is that folks who work with children have a positive disposition about the potential of the work and the process itself. So what you want to do is provide a way for those folks to get feedback to the boss, to the principal, to the superintendent, to the school psychologist, if you're responsible for the change effort. Give them a conduit to give you the information, but let them know that you expect a positive disposition out in the world, in the community, with others. The first step, of course, is to define where you are, and this is painful for some places because it requires you to maybe face some hard truths. But the message here is that everyone grows, and where you are today is not where you will be tomorrow. Every child can beat their score from the day before, and really, as you saw, a yield magnifier is being higher risk. So the goal is that everyone grows. We want to cultivate a growth mindset in our schools. It's not about attaining certain scores. It's about growing over time. And what I want to say to you all as school psychologists is you are masters of environmental engineering. You know how to do this. You do this all the time with children. And so think about teachers that you work with as being susceptible to the very same strategies that you use so well when you work with children who need different supports to be successful. You can adjust systematically teacher skill and capacity and environmental support and competing demands, and all of that those are the ways that you troubleshoot and enhance implementation. So at the end of all of this, yes, you get to use your analytical know-how. You don't lead with that. Don't lead with your data foot when you ask people to do this, but you got to have the chops, and I know you do. So you can look at what are the barriers and the punishers for implementation systematically. And you can make systematic efforts to minimize, remove, reduce, attenuate those things that interfere with correct implementation. And then what are the rewards in your setting for correct implementation? Attend to that. I mean, people have different currencies and what feels good to them and what they are pleased to accomplish. For some people, it's just seeing the growth of a kid. For others, it's maybe recognition among their peers and an opportunity to be a teacher leader. You know, you all are psychologists. So we need to do this work. We must attend to implementation because it is what kills the effort in most places. And then finally, I'm finishing with this copy of a paper that I came across this summer that I wrote, Mandy Matheny, that's me, 1985 in 6th grade. And Miss Petty said to me, you could have a career as a writer someday, I'm sure. And guess what? I did. So what you're doing really, really makes a difference. It is. I regret all of these years that I failed to recognize the soft side of this stuff because it's why I'm here. It's why I do what I do. So thank you.